Welcome to another episode of our Tech Talk Studio event. Tonight, we're going to focus on this topic, cybersecurity. My name is Bruce Wang. I am the director of the master's degree program in information technology, which is including computer science, data science, cybersecurity, digital media design, and systems engineering. The cybersecurity degree programs was launched about 2 years ago. And since then, a lot of things has changed in this field. And one of the things that making the learning of cybersecurity is critical is now we have AI in the game. Back in the old days, when we talk about security, way back when I was with IBM, we talk about virus and antivirus. And we talk about it's a game, it's a war between the good mathematicians and the bad mathematicians. Well, it's the same thing over here. AI plays a dual role in cybersecurity. There's bad actors using AI to attack. And then we have the good actors and trying to use AI to defend. So tonight, we example a panel of guest speakers. We have Jennifer Gold, and she is the Chief Information Security Officer at Aperture. And she's the former president and board chair emeritus of the New York Metro InfraGard Member Alliance. And Jennifer is a decorated cybersecurity leader and founding member of the National AI and Cybersecurity ISAO. And she also served in the U.S. Marine Corps Cyber Auxiliary and was named one of the top 50 global leaders in information security. Her numerous honors including the United States Presidential Call to Services awarded by President Biden. And her numerous honors include the New York State Assembly Women of Distinction Award and more. Jennifer, welcome. Welcome to the event.
Thank you so much, Bruce. It's an honor to be here, and I'm really looking forward to our conversation this evening.
Wonderful. And we also have David Cass, and he is the Global Chief Information Security Officer at GSR and the president of one of the largest Chief Information Security Officers professional organizations called CISOs Connect. And David is a former Federal Reserve Bank of New York lead regulator and a member of multiple board member of multiple cybersecurity organizations. And he is definitely a thought leader in the cloud security, digital assets, and regulatory risk. He was the Chief Information Security Officer at IBM Cloud. And we also have the honor having David to teach for us. And he actually teaches the admission course for our cybersecurity master degree program. David, welcome.
Bruce, thank you so much for having me. It's always a pleasure to be among distinguished colleagues.
Thank you. And we also have Naveen, and he is the managing director at TD Security and the former head of global third-party management at TD. He has a rich background in cybersecurity governance, enterprise risk, and technology strategy. So he brings over 20 years of leadership experience and in this space and in this field. And welcome, Naveen.
Thank you, Bruce, all the way from Toronto. Feels good to be back. And I'm looking forward to this conversation. And David and I had an opportunity to teach on this topic. And so I'm looking forward to today's discussion.
Thank you. All right. So now, what we want to do is that get our panelists to share knowledge with us, right? And let me start with the first question over here and see if we can use that to start the conversations. Given your job, right, and as the top leaders in this field and as the Chief Information Security Officers at the organizations that you serve, so what is the biggest misconception you have encountered about AI in cybersecurity? Jennifer?
I think one of the biggest misconceptions is people's usage of AI without regard for cybersecurity. So we're seeing a lot of shadow AI, which is the new version of shadow IT, where people are utilizing generative AI systems and using them to become more efficient and optimize their performance with their jobs, but oftentimes don't realize they're entering personal information. And we're seeing that data get leaked on darknet forums, and it's creating a very big security risk.
Yeah, leaking information, but that's one of the major risks. And David, any thoughts on that area?
So I definitely agree with Jennifer's comments, and I think also looking back maybe 7 months ago, I think organizations had the leisure to say, no, we weren't going to do, or we weren't going to avail ourselves of AI. I think it's at the point where it's no longer a choice. It's embedded into way too many enterprise technologies at this point in time. So it's now, looking forward of how do you get, to Jennifer's point, a good strategy around safely using these technologies, because they're so embedded, a lot of times they won't even realize that they're using them.
Right?
Yeah, so Bruce, with anytime you talk about AI, there's always this misconception it's going to replace us, right? And so the truth behind it is it will make our lives better. And to David's point around being integrated in our security practice, but the need for human judgment, the need for human interpretation, and the need for humans to be strategic about things is going to be right up there. And so the more AI we do, our skills need to evolve with it, and we can't throw more AI at a problem and expect to solve it. We're just going to have to elevate as security leaders to bring the elements that the AI is not going to bring. And so we're looking forward to how we can elevate the skills and the way we look at AI part of our ecosystem and not hope that it will solve everything. We still need humans, security leaders and thought leadership to tackle all the problems we haven't seen yet.
So we cannot just depend on AI and machine learning. Basically, the machine learn on its own, right? So you don't think that AI can learn and continue to fight new, new things that the bad AI, the bad actors come up with?
You can, and that's the aspiration and the goal, Bruce. But as we learn through practice, there's still a lot of tweaks. There's biases. There are black boxes, and they correct themselves. And a lot of times as leaders, when you're making decision, there is an element of your judgment that over time, being in the field that has seen different patterns and things, you want to be able to build strong judgment that allows you to use these tools to make better informed decisions.
Yeah, so Jennifer, how has your team changed given AI, right? How do they, from what you deal with before AI and versus now, and how's your team?
So I think what's really compelling and interesting is playing around with some of the small language models, and also the way that we can utilize it so effectively with open source intelligence. And we're able to take these large data sets and synthesize them. So AI is very good at synthesizing large data sets and detecting patterns, finding anomalies, and things that we're not able to discern. Even, AI for AI, right? Discerning deep fakes and things that are created with AI. Oftentimes we're not able to discern that, but AI can. So I think it's really, it's incredible from a security perspective, and it's needed.
Wow. So, David, are we at an inflection point?
So I'd say, there's a lot going on as far as, how much, when you look at LLMs, of how much, pretty much everything on the internet's been indexed already. by a lot of the LLMs. I think the real inflection point is kind of determining how do we safely adopt all of these technologies to make sure that we don't lose our intellectual property, we don't create unforeseen vulnerabilities or entryways into our systems.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So well, maybe that we can think a little bit about how is AI enabling the next generation's cyber attacks, right? Like deepfake phishing. We talk a lot about phishing in the past. And phishing is basically that, I guess, someone that use some kind of social engineering and trying to get somebody to fall for the trap, right? And but now that we don't need people to do that, so how is AI enabling the next generation of cyber attacks, right? In this sense, Naveen?
Yeah, that's a great observation, Bruce. When you look at deep fake phishing, gone are the days where the attacker needs to learn English, for example, to be able to create content to phish, where the attackers now have access to incredible tools that allow them to search your public data, your personal information, and do very personalized deep phishing tactics. And it's incredible how much work that is already done for them with very little effort. And so it's changed the game in the ability to not only give them a head start, but all these different tools to cast a very winnable attack against vulnerabilities with all of this information that they're able to synthesize. And they can scale, Bruce. The scale that they're able to do now with these type of tools, the mass scaling, the writing of malware codes, like the game has gotten so sophisticated, not only from the defense side, but the attack side, as they're learning how to use these tools to just proliferate tactics into our environments.
Yeah. So, but Jennifer, how are you seeing AI shifting the tactics of nation states or organized cybercrime, the bad actors, right?
So I think AI has essentially democratized cybercrime, and it's made things so much easier. So if we think about the ways that we're utilizing it and how it helps us in innovation, coding, things like that, the same holds true for cyber criminals, and they're laser focused on that and spend all of their time and energy on enhancing and increasing cybercrime. So as far as the ways we're seeing it again, everything from phishing and social engineering and the amplification of that to malware, changes in malware. And it's actually opened up a whole new world of information collection around prompt injection attacks, where you can go in and retrieve data that was in generative AI models. So there are new tactics and new vulnerabilities being exploited. But I think the overall picture in terms of cybercrime is that we're seeing the scale is much greater and the speed is much greater. So it presents a huge challenge for all of the defenders.
Yeah, so any thought on that?
So I definitely agree, and I'd say, within the construct of the digital asset space, it makes it even more challenging because the time horizon to catch and react to these things is even shorter. Yeah. I've had to, work as an expert with numerous companies where literally in under 30 minutes they've lost, north of $25 million. And having AI as some of the enabling tools, whether it's from a deep fake or whether it's probing for how quickly can you route these to other wallets, or how quickly can you route these things to other areas that don't necessarily have AML or KYC. It makes it even easier for the attacker to kind of exfiltrate the money. When you look at 30 minutes to lose more than 25 million, that's not a lot of time to react to things.
Yeah, one the biggest thing is automations, right? And so basically that we're enabling the bad actors with automations. Naveen, I don't know what have you seen in your organization? The type of attack and that is AI facilitated.
Yeah, so again, a lot of the FIs, banks, they're constantly being attacked to look for entry points. And so when you look at the use of AI, it's done in many ways. And I think 70% of those attacks make it through our environment, through our vendors, right? We buy a lot of different software, plug a lot of things in, and the threat actors know exactly how to leverage our vendors who we buy AI-like things from to open up our surface. There's always attacks from phishing, deep fakes, trying to get a hold of our client data. And so incredible amount of phishing attacks we see. A lot of threat actors also try to come through our endpoints. And so we're seeing a lot of stuff also come through our supply chain. So there's different ways of bad actors piggybacking off of our processes that involve AI, people, process, and technology to get access to our data.
Yeah. So, but David, given your role, your previous role, right, and that at the Federal Reserve Bank at New York as a regulator, and your involvement with so many financial organizations, and that what are they thinking in terms of cybersecurity, cyber attack, and now that with the AI enablement?
So I think there's several areas that organizations really have to look at of not only understanding where and what tools are you adopting that have AI built into it, but if you're building your own models as well, how do you put good governance around it? How do you put transparency around these models? And to your point, how do you protect them from different types of cyber attacks? Because again, the models learn from the data, so if they can be poisoned, by an attacker, they'll be pretty much useless, or create a new means of attack, because you'll be so focused on I guess the misinformation that the model is presenting you with that you may miss critical spots.
What about from a regulatory aspect, right? And are there any new regulatory?
So I mean, there's guidance within the EU, within the US. There's also more guidance coming. I did publish something a while back of 10 things large financial institutions need to be thinking about when they're adopting AI, not just from a security perspective. So I'd say there's going to be more regulations and more expectations around it, because again, as a former regulator, you can outsource certain things. And Naveen mentioned earlier of having a human in the loop to kind of double check sanity check things, but you can never outsource your accountability. So if you decide to place reliance on these AI models, whether it's something you built or something you're using, and something goes terribly wrong, the accountability is still going to fall on the organization that adopted the use of those models.
Yeah. So Jennifer, maybe you can help us that in terms of third-party ecosystems and supply chain, right? And that how are AI risk evolving in third-party ecosystems?
Well, in some ways, it provides, this is where we get into the dual-edged sword, right? So in some ways, it helps us because we're able to track down vulnerabilities and through large data sets very quickly and gain better insight. And it provides us with a window into risk that we didn't previously have. But at the same time, AI is also being used for the weaponization. And as we use it to gain capabilities, cyber criminals are doing the same exact thing. And it's being weaponized and used to target some of these areas. And we also have the consideration on supply chain in terms of the physical requirements around supporting this world that we live in with AI. So looking at all of the data centers that are needed and getting back into that model and what that presents for us. So multiple considerations, you have your software supply chain, you have your hardware and so on. So I think there are multiple repercussions and considerations for this new world that we live in. And like a lot of things, we release things into the world and we don't necessarily have all the governance or all of the infrastructure ready to support it.
Yes, I mean, back in my IBM days, that I believe that company like IBM is like working with a lot of the third party, a lot of the vendors, right? And that obviously that they don't want to do all the manual work, and they have all the vendors basically that integrated into IBM systems. But in order for you to be a vendor, to be an approved vendor, you're gonna have guidelines, and you're gonna have like particular API and different interfaces that you're supposed to connect to, so that we can limit those exposures, right? So is that the same situation, the same case out there, how we managing and this third-party ecosystems?
I think I was going to say from a federal perspective, there are restrictions on the use of AI, and I think everyone's trying to get a hold of how AI is being used in different tools by different government agencies, whether on the state or federal level. So I think that's a huge consideration. And then there's the problem that we are being presented with AI on our phones and other areas where we're not necessarily opting into the technology, but it's being integrated into other technologies that we use.
And the new trend we're seeing is really around the whole supply chain situation, where every organization is trying to put AI in so they can get really good at supply chain management. And so they look at it as an offensive capability to drive economic value in their ability to procure things, to manage their supply chain, to get orders out, and let the AI help them in that capability. But at the same time, we're seeing threat actors trying to piggyback off of that to get in on that AI you're using to run your supply chain, to disrupt it, to screw up the forecasting in the supply, tamper with pricing, logistics. And so that opens up a whole different way, a new set of risks that the company has to look at, where their intention was to use AI really to drive value using all of their supply data, the production data, the warranty, like all of that was meant to do good, but we're seeing such a trend in threat actors finding ways to get in there to actually disrupt the sector, right? To Jen's point, that, can they disrupt the production of hardware and the distribution of cables and networks? So it's an interesting pace where the threat actors are looking for critical spaces like supply chains that companies rely on to run their business, and finding that as a way to get to protected data, intellectual data, and try to disrupt the whole sector. And we're seeing a lot of that, and you can hear some of the headlines in these volatilities for supply and demand.
That's very interesting, right? I mean, now everyone talk about the supply chain, and given the experience that we have with the disruption of the pandemic, and so everyone is worried about the supply chain, right? And but it's more than just where do you manufacture the product, where you getting the supplies, but there's also the new level of the new threat. Right.
And they're also, to David's point, is if buying data is part of your supply chain, how are they finding ways to poison it? Or if it's actual physical software or hardware, then how are they trying to Trojan horse into your product? So it's new ways and new windows they're trying to find to come into your environment. And that's where AI, as much as all the companies try to use it for driving value, the threat actors are equally working as hard to find entry points.
Yeah, and I would add to that point, I mean, everybody is relying on code development, heavily reliant, and we're seeing more and more requests. Almost every day there's requests by developers to use different tools that have AI embedded in it. So now the question is, well, one, how reliant are they on that, where it's actually either decreasing their coding ability, or how much of a potential exposure is it creating for another like SolarWinds type incident, which is going to be large spread, because you have so many providers that are helping developers write the code that if something happens to that system, now all of a sudden how many organizations are going to be exposed all over again.
And to that point, even considering data provenance, the data you're using and the integrity around the data. And I think that will be a question that comes forward. People will start having to account for that in a more meaningful way.
Yeah, but let's continue this topic here, right? And say, where is AI having the biggest defensive impact right now, and where is fell short, right? Any thoughts?
So I'd say, from my experience, it's really helping a lot of our security operations teams, because ordinarily when you get some alerts, I mean, these systems generate lots and lots of alerts. So, getting to the meaningful ones quickly is very important, but then also AI has been super helpful. And, usually once you get an alert that you're looking into, you have to kind of generate something that we call like an Excel sheet, which kind of starts leading the investigation of all the systems or the interconnections of where this may have come in from and what needs to be checked. The AI tools right now are very effective at generating those types of informational reports, where now you can get a skilled, responder to investigate that within minutes, rather than having them take hours to kind of manually build those spreadsheets.
Yeah. So, Jennifer, are corporate boards and executive prepared to support AI-driven cyber defense system?
I would say not necessarily at this moment. I think that the key thing is going to be the way we really get a hold of this, and what we need to do focuses heavily on governance and the evolution of our governance. And we need to have the right policies in place. We need to understand that people are going to use these technologies regardless. And to David's point before, so how do we enable people to innovate and use these technologies and support them as security practitioners, but do so in a way that has the right guardrails in place and provide that visibility to boards, and also be able to, have the right tools to quantify the risk and the need for the guardrails. So I think, there has been a long pattern that's understood of cybersecurity practitioners, struggling to get their programs across the board and in their communication with boards. So this kind of adds another variable to that equation. And I think working more closely with boards on those risks, presenting them and having transparency around the tools and things we use, and then working hand in hand with boards to help evolve those policies will be really important.
And if you're really going to automate, or leverage AI to, I guess, the fullest extent, where it could automatically make changes on your behalf, there's always a learning curve with these things. So it's almost like the data loss protection stuff, where everybody would kind of put it into monitoring mode, and then how many people actually would put it into active blocking mode. And then I guess as far as an AI perspective, at what level are you comfortable allowing it to have enough of a super user kind of access where it can actively make defensive changes within your infrastructure.
Right.
And there's benefit there, but there is some concern.
Right.
Yeah. So anything to add, Naveen?
I think David's spot on. Is you cannot stop at just the creation of it, but where do we promote it to add value? And that's where, if you don't get that right, then you're not really getting the bang for your investment.
Yeah. So one of the things that we talk about in AI, and when we think about AI ethics, and we think about AI being in use in real world environment, right? And the biggest thing is about trust, right? And so any guidance or any suggestions on how do we earn the trust, right? We talk about getting the board on board, and how do we get the trust established?
So I think, even as a former regulator, one of the big points of establishing trust, especially if it's going to be used externally or internally, is the whole construct of transparency and explainability. Yeah. As a former regulator, if the only person you could put in the room to explain how the model worked or how the AI worked was the data scientists, that was automatically a sign that we have an issue. So I think the explainability and the transparency has to be at a level where the general consumer can understand what actions is this taking, on our corporate systems, and exactly how is this working, and what have we permitted it to do. Is to Naveen's earlier point, it can't operate just as a black box where it just makes decisions and you have to accept the decision for what it's worth.
Yeah, and you have to overlay trust, transparency with active monitoring. right? And so there's got to be a better runway where you can demonstrate that this idea, this model is doing exactly what we intended to, and there's full transparency. You can walk backwards. There's multiple folks in the organization who can cover for each other, and it's not a black box. And then it showed some level of consistency that you've instrumented to show you the actions, the ability to show where it went off the playbook and how did you address it to bring it back. And so really you want to see a lot of consistency in the openness, the ability to stay close to it, diversifying the knowledge pool, and then metricing it so that a board or senior management has some trust that someone is actually watching over it, is doing exactly what is said, even when if got off course, the organization had a playbook to bring you back to course or exit. So those elements I think are foundational, Bruce, to building that trust.
Yeah, and that's actually a really great point, because you talk about and from a regulatory point of view, that's what we would call drift.
Yes.
So it's if you're building your own models, you need some way of instrumenting that when drift occurs, so you can retrain.
Back,
So the bigger question is kind of in the supply chain management, we're all relying on those third-party checklists and everything else. Maybe we have to start adding those questions of like, how do they actually monitor those models for drift, and what's the process for retraining, and if the model does drift, as a consumer, do I get notified?
Yeah. Absolutely.
So are we trading one blind spot with another by depending too heavily on automated alerts with AI?
You want to go first?
In some ways, I think we have to approach it just like anything else, right, with common sense, and we have to look at it. But I do think we open up the door for additional risk through some of the automation, and it really depends. We have to have the right monitoring around it, as you said.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's the huge potential benefit of the upside of it, because when I look at, when I was at IBM, as CISO, we would probably get more than 1 billion alerts a month. So how do you manage that level of alerts across 80 plus data centers? So you really have to look at it from the point of view of that, AI could really be a tool for getting through the noise that's in those systems and getting to the areas that you really have to look at. But it goes back to how do you train that model and who's training it?
Yeah, and it's a very convenient, efficient way for us to scale and stay competitive with the threat actors. But you can also get into a very bad space of false positives and false negatives that equally draw on the company's resources to check them out or miss something. And the other danger is complacency, right? The more you rely on automated, you and your practitioners may lose their muscle memory on how to deal with things, see it differently. And so you got to be aware where it works great, it's great. But at the same time, if the tuning and engineering is not continuously calibrated, you're going to spend a lot of effort looking at the false positives or negatives. And quite frankly, you may build a bit of complacency in your organization. So good problems to have, Bruce, that we all have to work out. But you got to be careful.
Yeah, this is what Jennifer mentioned earlier, that about governance, right? Yeah. And but maybe they can share with us that what frameworks are emerging to govern AI tools, right, in cybersecurity.
I direct people a lot to use the guidelines around the NIST AI risk management framework. It's very helpful. Certainly you can look at phenomenal, tools and guidance has really come out of the EU for a long time. And OWASP, that's another great reference. And I think we're seeing, the emergence of more from a guidance and regulatory perspective in New York. New York DFS has put forward some great documentation and controls, and I would recommend that as well.
And I would I definitely echo those comments. And I think part of it is just making sure you're applying good, solid security fundamentals, to that technology adoption. Because when we look at like compliance blind spots and other things like that, asset management is still like an Achilles heel for large organizations. They don't know what they have, or it used to be if you were less than 10, whether you're in 10%, you were considered pretty good of knowing of all your assets. But if you're a large organization and you have 300,000 plus assets, then you have 30,000 things that are unaccounted for, which is pretty scary. And I'd say that next emerging spot is really, your asset inventory of what cloud and SaaS products are you using, and how many of those actually have AI embedded into them.
Yeah, so Naveen, what should the Chief Information Security Officers consider when evaluating AI-based vendor risk?
Yeah, I would say, as a CISO, first of all, you got to be well versed in your own third-party risk management program inside your organization. Make sure that there's adequate inherent risk assessment, due diligence being done, and then making sure you have the right due diligence on the vendor itself. But apart from having the foundational core capabilities in that space, AI specific, Bruce, I would want to know the vendor's risk appetite in this space in AI. I would want to know what kind of governance policies they have. I would want to know what David and I talked earlier. How do you monitor? How do you check the drift? What do you do in those cases? I would want to put some SLAs and KPIs if we were to buy your model, ingest your model. And then I would go back and ask the CISO to go look at the contract covenants and the master service agreements and figure out, based on what your due diligence you did with that company, one, do you feel comfortable with that? And a lot of times, a lot of these AI vendors, products are still very young in their governance and their policies and their framework. So that's where you have to ask your human judgment as well, and saying what we're about to buy and where we're about to put it in our stack, how critical is it? And then making sure your contracts are adjusted accordingly to your risk appetite. And then lastly, to I think it was David's point earlier, is making sure that you trust they'll let you know if they're turning on a feature. And then active management, making sure you're in loop, you're in touch, you're watching how the implementation's going, and you're keeping a close eye on the use of it. And the harder part of this is we all have deep vendor pool. So you have to take a risk-based approach in almost having a risk category for all of the AI you want to look to buy to your risk appetite, because you can't do that level of work, Bruce, on all the different AIs coming out now. And so I would say, as a CISO, be very comfortable with your third-party risk assessment program. Make sure it's elevated to include the AI data risk, compliance risk, regulatory risk, and then make sure you understand the vendor's AI program governance, and then make sure your legal covenants and protection is well articulated.
Yeah, and I would add to Naveen's point that a lot of these SaaS products or other products are licensing the same big LLMs. So it kind of goes back to, are we kind of creating a single point of failure? Right. They're not necessarily building their own. A lot of them are licensing a lot of the common ones that we're using right now. So if I have 20 vendors that are doing that and something happens to that library, I'm going to have a problem.
Right. Back to also data provenance. But the other piece I would add to what you were saying, Naveen, is around encryption. So how is your data being managed? How is it stored? How is it encrypted? And getting a better understanding of that. And I think one of the things, just the amount of data leaking right now is tremendous. And that's something that cyber criminals are actively using to their benefit.
And the last thing, and great point, Jen, is do you have an exit strategy? If they turn down an AI component in something you bought and they didn't tell you, can you stop using it so an exit, knowing where your data is protected, all of those things. I think if I was the CISO in these situations, make sure you have a playbook before you get into that relationship.
Have you factored it into your incident response plan?
Yeah,
exactly.
Very good. So when I talk to a lot of the professionals out there, talk to a lot of chief information security officers out there in the industry a few years ago, and one of the biggest bottleneck is people, talent, right? And so everyone's telling me that, hey, we like to do this initiative, but we just don't have that. We cannot recruit the talent. Is that still the case given AI? I mean, didn't AI took care of the problem?
So I'd say AI is solving some of our lower level problems of I guess making it so we can focus our our security staff on what's really important and saving them time. Is it a replacement for them? Not really. It was, again, you still need human intervention, and you still need people that understand how your organization works, because everybody might be using the same enterprise technology stack, but we all configure it differently, so we all create different vulnerabilities there. So I'd say it helps, and I'd say it's helping our skilled people focus their time better, and getting rid of some of the more laborious lower skill level work. But I'd say it's by no means is it a replacement for skilled security professionals.
Wow. So hey, Jennifer, I mean, what is your 12 months or maybe 12 to 24 months forecast for AI and cybersecurity?
Well, for one moment, I just want to touch on that to share David's point. I do think it's bringing us tremendous operational efficiency, and I think that will continue. So we'll be able to focus on being more strategic with cybersecurity, and I see more of that evolving. But I also see at the same time novel ways of attack, new vectors, and new ways that we really need to take a step back and take a look at how we're utilizing these technologies and be more thoughtful in our approach. Shadow AI is very problematic right now, and I see that continuing to create a larger threat landscape. On a positive note, though, I think it presents us with this great opportunity to upskill. And to your point on talent, I think we really need to start upskilling and training people, and education is so incredibly important. We can't just assume that we're rolling out all of this new technology without training people in the best way to use it.
Yeah. What's your crystal ball telling you?
My crystal ball is telling me that the threat actors are continuing and will not stop with finding ways to leverage AI to find entry points, and the expectation I have is that security professionals, we're going to equally learn how to defend using these tools. I think there's a whole culture awareness in organizations, first, second, third line board governance, that allows more flexibility in fast pathing some of these risk frameworks. The appetite has to be calibrated. AI won't be this scary thing in some areas, where the companies in the offensive side are going to want to adopt more AI to sell credit cards and sell mortgages in the banking, for example, differently. And so there's going to be this, I think, crossroads between security, business, and AI, where if the risk is not balanced in the lens of commercial, then the companies that figure it out will have a competitive advantage. So to Jen's point, the security profession has to keep pace with the business aspirations while balancing risk and reward to help give you a competitive advantage. And the threat actors are going to find ways with all of these new technology, Gen AI, deep fakes. And so we have to not get complacent. There's going to be more capabilities. Again, you look at some of the recent incidents with deep phishing and wiring money. And so I think the next 18 to 24 months is going to be very focused on learning the fundamentals of AI as organizations, building detailed playbooks, having defined risk appetites, potentially more regulatory intervention. And we all going to have to spend money building capabilities. Like, gone are the days where you can not spend money on defend AI, spend AI. I think it'll be an important narrative. And from a security lens, talent. We got to find the right talent. We got to train the right talent. We got to give them experiences that are rewarding by taking some of the low operational activities and then elevating them to get more interested in defending, strategizing, protecting, and I think collectively that will help companies.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, I think that obviously the arc for AI is definitely going to continue. I'm personally excited about using agentic AI. I'm kind of experimenting with that now. That brings other challenges with it, but I think that's going to offer potentially big benefits for security in that space as far as being able to kind of actively defend faster.
So we started by saying that, hey, this whole cybersecurity field, and if you go back maybe like 20-some, 30 years ago, probably now, right? 20 years ago, right? So it started like, virus and antivirus and on the computer. And we said that it's a war between the good mathematicians and the bad mathematicians. So who's winning?
Cyber criminals are always early adopters of technology. We've seen that with cloud. We've seen that even with financial crime. Before it moved to digital assets, there was always elements of. So the criminals are definitely early adopters of new technology. So I'd say we're going to continue to see that, and it's always going to be a continuous battle because technically your attackers only need to get it right once within the right organization, where we need to be much more consistent on our approach. But I think the AI will enable us to be better defenders as well. But it is still very much a race.
But on that point too, I think we're very reactive when it comes to cybersecurity in general. So that's a cultural issue. And I think a lot of our solutions are very tactical. And in order for us to gain advantage over cyber criminals, we have to be more strategic, proactive, and look at more preemptive capabilities. And AI does afford us that ability to evolve and to shift left. And so I think that's an incredibly important point, is that culturally we need to shift as well.
Absolutely. We have a lot of the students, right, in the master degree cybersecurity program, and we definitely have a lot of students that also has the, from a career perspective, aspiration for being a chief information security officer. So, Naveen, maybe you can start. What advice you will give to future CISO, Chief Information Security Officer, to prepare themselves for the next generation of this AI threat, right?
Yeah, I would say, Bruce, is be, and I use this word a lot, be brilliant at the basics, right? Is AI is always going to evolve, but you have to understand the core fundamentals of protect, making sure you understand that there's, the tools to protect, whether it's your emails, firewalls, like you have to know and be really brilliant at the basics to have the ability and the skill set and the evolving investment in yourself through commercial acumen, technical knowledge, to be able to keep up with the speed and velocity and the complexity of AI-driven threats. And so I would say, take it as a challenge, right? And make sure you know your fundamentals core of how to protect. And then I would say elevate it by continuously investing in your knowledge education. Create a great network of security professionals. I find that helps a lot. And a lot of the things we battle are similar. And so having a great network helps. And then don't be shy. Be on the leading edge of learning how to use AI yourself to defend, and be able to convince your organization to support you on that mission. And with those attributes, I think you will bring security to the forefront against this backdrop of AI-driven threats.
Wonderful. And so I'm going to ask David and Jennifer give us the share their advice. And but I want to let the audience know that if you have questions, and that you can basically send your questions in, and that we're gonna basically entertain some of the Q&A, right? So, any thoughts, David, on advice?
I definitely echo Naveen's statements, and I think the nice thing I find about cybersecurity is if you're going to be in the field, you have to understand that you're signing up for lifetime learning. Because you look at cloud, you look at AI. The next is going to be quantum computing and post-quantum encryption. So you have to keep current in this field, and you have to be knowledgeable about a wide variety of subjects. So it's if you enjoy a lifetime of learning, it's essentially what you're signing up for. As well as and Bruce, we've talked about this a number of times, is that the entry into cyber comes from very different backgrounds, and it's really a field that supports a big diversity of thinking, because there is no real one way to think about these threats. So the diversity of thought also helps us as defenders as well.
Yeah. Jennifer?
Well, to follow up on David's point, I think drinking really great coffee and is also a very, very important part of being a CISO, given the extensive learning that is ongoing. But it's an incredibly exciting field. I think we have to move away from this concept of check the box on compliance. I think we need to really look at how we build resiliency and what that means for us. And I think, we have this talking about quantum and AI and what that looks like in the future. I think we need to partner hand in hand with the organizations we support and really look at scenario building and testing and taking these tabletop exercises that we do and bringing them to the next level where they're really meaningful and we start challenging our assumptions and don't risk the failure of imagination of what comes next. And there's a lot of good work to be done.
This is great advice, and greatly appreciate it. And so we're going to open up the forum and to entertain some questions. If any of you that have questions for our panelists, just send them in. So here's a question for you, David. We have talked about insurance, cybersecurity insurance in the past, right? So how would the insurance changes now given AI's role in cybersecurity?
So I think it's going to get down to the fundamentals, because when you're taking cyber insurance, the insurers have gotten a lot smarter about now asking the right questions and actually checking your documents and maybe even auditing your technology. Before they were willing to more broadly write policies, and now they really want to do verifications that can include up to audit. So I think part of it is going to be, and the use of AI can have an impact on not only your cyber defenses, but how the business operates, and potentially, whether you accidentally create a supply chain glitch or whether you accidentally take systems offline, trying to troubleshoot things. So I think it's going to be another component now that the insurance companies look at, as well as if you're building those models yourself, they're really going to have to look at the fundamentals of, what's the governance, what's the harm, because there's been organizations that have used, AI to determine whether or not people get credit. And in some cases, it's been shown that they have bias, in which case they've been fined for things like that. So I think a lot of it's going to determine, not only how is the organization using AI, but where is that AI kind of placed within that corporate ecosystem.
Okay, so here's another one, right? So if the CEOs had to make a single decision tomorrow about integrating AI into their cyber strategy, what should it be? Jennifer, you want to take that one?
So I think it's already in your environment. And I think everyone needs to be fully aware everyone is using it, and we need to understand that and accept it. And so what conversations are you having with your users? Are you understanding what their needs are and what they're trying to achieve? And looking at the business objectives and being able to then create a strategy where you have the right controls in place and be able to bring things into your environment. I'm a huge believer that security is an enabler of innovation. It's not something that stops innovation. It provides the ability to innovate. So figure out what they're trying to achieve and secure it.
Thank you. So let's see. How are you circulating metrics such as loss event frequency for new technologies like AI, where historical data isn't yet available? Want to take that one?
That's a flashback to when we were teaching risk. So I'd say that whole construct of LEF still applies, but part of it is trying to figure out where in the system is that AI sitting. Is it optimizing shipping? Is it optimizing product design? So I think part of it's going to figure out what's the function before you can calculate the LEF. What is the function of what purpose is that AI serving? Is it choosing who you deal with? From a supplier point of view, or is it like critical in your manufacturing process? And Naveen, what are your thoughts? I know we've taught LEF before, so.
You're taking me back to chapter 6. No, David, you're spot on. Again, it's easy to measure when you have data. It's hard to infer things on something very early in adoption. And so it goes back to, again, watching for drift, making some human judgment calls, and then just practicing, right? I wouldn't leverage it for anything prime time very soon if it is tied to a higher value process in your ecosystem. And so just being judgmental about building it up for something that's a critical function that you want to put AI on, because the question is spot on. It's very hard to measure some of those things that we've traditionally taught or used to give some level of confidence. But this is a new space, right? And it's going to take some time. The model's going to learn the data differently. So go ahead.
And to touch back to your earlier point, keeping the human in the loop. And I think our future looks like human machine teams and the ways that we can leverage technology to increase our capabilities. But the human in the loop is essential. Yeah.
So we cannot do away with
people still matter.
Yes. Right. So okay. All right. So how are you distinguishing between hype and true strategic value when integrating AI into your security architecture?
So I think you have to look at right now where is it giving you the biggest bang for the buck? I mean, so AI is kind of overused. When you look at the fact that I come out of traditional financial services, we've used there's a spectrum of AI. Kind of robotic process automation would be considered probably some of the earliest types of AI, and then you have machine learning. So I'd say I look at it from where am I going to get the biggest value for the investment? What tools can I potentially retire, and is it going to save my team time focusing on and enable them to really focus on the more critical events? That's where I kind of really look for, the value of AI currently, at least in cybersecurity.
It's a great question. And I think the investors inside the companies that fund these things also are asking the same question. And so I think we're all starting to get better at calculating the ROI, right? And David alluded to it earlier. If the size of your security operations to handle a volume of work over time after ingesting the AI protect strategy is able to do that and more at a lower operating cost, that's something you can measure. The cost of triaging automatically on alerts and incidents, there's a unit cost you can measure. So I think as part of the journey, security leaders need to also be able to connect the dots on the investment to the ROI back to the company. And in the lens of we defended and we added value economically as well as enable capability. So I think it's a very good question, and it's going to be something that every level in a company is going to want to know as we all go forward with more funding and more asks to say, show me how you've converted that investment into value.
Wonderful. So let's see, do you think that there would be value in an AI certification program to set a baseline of AI behavior such as to show that the AI does not have an easy mechanisms to generate malware.
So I kind of look at it as how, that's more a function of how do you evaluate the AI that you're bringing on board. Because if you're using one of the open AI models or you're using it, you're reliant on how do they do their testing and how are they building it. So I'd say those are valid questions to ask them and figure out how do you get comfortable, that they're doing governance, that they're monitoring for drift, and what are your contractual obligations that you can put in where you get early notification of if the model drifts, if the other security issues, was there a poisoning attack? I'd say a lot of those things right now kind of have to be built in contractually, since so much of this is outsourced.
Yeah. What is the origin of the data sets
Yeah.
too? And
Right.
in thinking about that, actually, I was looking at you and thinking about blockchain and data provenance and how we start tracking that better. I think that's really important.
Yeah. And I think, it'll add value too. In general, at least AI will add value to hopefully making us even more, proactive in the network defense as far as,
Yes.
with the volume of alerts and volume of other things that we get, it should be, it'll get much better at finding that needle in the haystack per se.
Mm-hmm.
Well, wonderful. And so maybe we just take one more, that our cyber AI focused course on the horizon.
So I'd say I've started drafting something. so we're going to introduce elements of that for the upcoming Cali class that we're going to teach during the summer. But I have started putting together, what that construct would look like, everything from ethics to, what are the, how do you use these tools? How, so that there is something there. It's, so
And
stand by.
This goes back to the need to invest in talent, connect the dots between cyber and AI, Bruce, as you said, where our traditional way of protecting the landscape continues to evolve. And as we're all set up here, we've committed to continuous learning, right? And so that will be an enabler for anyone wanting to advance in this career. You have to be committed, and hopefully we will come together in new content.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I can absolutely say I can happily teach ethical AI hacking if anyone's interested. No, just from playing around with the tools and everything, I've developed some strategies around that. I think it's really exciting in terms of the classes and training that we can do and upskilling.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is one of the reasons that we have this event, right? And that given this AI is now becoming a household talk, right? And that is becoming integrated in everything that we do. And it also changes the field and changes how we respond to threats in the cyberspace, and as well as that how we defend our systems. And so definitely that what we do is that we assemble a team of advisors, right? And that we have a industry thought leaders advisory board along with our faculties, and to continue to look at the curriculum and continue to look at the different courses that we need in order to enable and prepare the talent in this field. So thank you very much, Levine, and for joining us, and all the way from Toronto, and David, and coming from Pennsylvania, and Jennifer, New York, right?
Yeah.
And so thank you so much, thank
you
you for sharing your thoughts with our community here. Everyone, this is basically concluding the event for this evening. And we will be back for the next event in the future months. Have a good evening.